Could Africa's most brutal and repressive dictatorship be coming to an end? For over 3 decades, Isaias Afwerki has ruled Eritrea with an iron grip, turning it into one of the most secretive and authoritarian countries in the world. His regime has crushed dissent, forced citizens into indefinite military service and kept the country in near total isolation. However, after years of brutal crackdowns, dissidents are regrouping in an attempt to challenge his rule. But can this entrenched dictatorship really be dismantled, and could neighbouring Ethiopia be the key to efforts to overthrow this totalitarian state? Hello and welcome. If you're new to the channel, my name is James Ker-Lindsay, and here I take an informed look at international relations, conflict, security and statehood. Authoritarian states are remarkably common in the international system. While it's hard to pinpoint the exact number as precise definitions differ, estimates suggest that around 60 countries are currently ruled by dictators or highly authoritarian leaders. Altogether, this means that as much as 40% of the world's population lives under autocratic rule. But even within this number, there are considerable variations. While some of these countries are still relatively open and penalties for opposing the leader are relatively mild, others are highly repressive, where any dissent is suppressed, often with imprisonment, torture, or even execution. One of the world's longest standing and most brutal dictatorships is Eritrea. For over 30 years, Isaias Afwerki has ruled his country with absolute authority, cutting it off from most of the world and turning it into what's often been called Africa's North Korea. The state of Eritrea is located in northeast Africa. At around 120,000 square kilometres, or around 45,000 square miles, to its east it has a Red Sea coastline. To the southeast it borders Djibouti, and to the northwest, Sudan. However, its longest land border is with Ethiopia. Eritrea's precise population is unknown, as no official figures are available. However, the UN suggests it currently has around 3.5 million inhabitants. It's believed that this is divided roughly equally between Orthodox Christians and Sunni Muslims. Likewise, there's no official economic data available. Although it's resource-rich, with gold and copper, its per capita GDP is estimated to be around $700, making it one of Africa's poorest countries. Sitting on the Red Sea, one of the world's key trading routes, Eritrea's history stretches back to ancient times. However, our story really begins with the expansion of European colonialism in the 19th century. After establishing a trading presence in the territory, in 1890 the Kingdom of Italy established the colony of Eritrea. This lasted until the mid-1930s, when Italy conquered Ethiopia, uniting it with Eritrea and Somaliland to form Italian East Africa. But this would be short-lived. During the Second World War, British troops, alongside Ethiopian guerrillas, forced Italy to withdraw from the region. From there, Eritrea would follow a very different course to the other two territories. While Ethiopia regained its previous independence and became a founding member of the United Nations in 1945, Italian Somaliland was passed back to Italian rule in 1949 and became independent in 1960 as one part of the Somali Republic. However, Eritrea remained under British administration, becoming a UN Trust territory. As decolonisation began to grow, the expectation was that Eritrea would also be given the right to self-determination. The trouble was that Eritreans were divided on its future. The goal of the Muslim community was independence. Failing that, they would settle for continued UN trusteeship under British rule. However, the Christians saw things differently. As members of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, they preferred union with neighbouring Ethiopia. Crucially, the Ethiopian Emperor, Haile Selassie, also pushed for this option. Aside from arguing that the area had historically been Ethiopian, he saw this as a chance for landlocked Ethiopia to gain vital access to the sea. Faced with these differences, the UN General Assembly formed a commission to investigate the matter. But it failed to reach an agreement. Instead, it offered 3 options. First, Ethiopia could simply annex Eritrea. Secondly, Ethiopia and Eritrea could unite as a federation. And thirdly, Eritrea could continue under UN trusteeship pending independence. In the end, following pressure from Western-aligned Ethiopia and with British and American support, the General Assembly recommended the federal settlement, and on the 15th of September 1952, the two countries united to form the Federation of Ethiopia and Eritrea. From the start, the new state was an unequal union. Ethiopia, which was far larger and had a long history of independence, naturally saw itself as the dominant partner, leading to Eritrean discontent. This eventually exploded in September 1961 when an armed group, the Eritrean Liberation Front, launched a revolt against Ethiopian rule. In response, Ethiopia now dissolved the federation and annexed Eritrea. While the Eritrean war for independence continued over the next decade, events took a different turn in September 1974 when Emperor Haile Selassie was overthrown and Ethiopia came under the rule of a Marxist military dictatorship. As Ethiopia as a whole was thrown into civil war, the ELF joined with other rebel groups to oppose the new regime. However, in the late 1970s, the ELF split. Under its new leader, Isaias Afwerki, the new Eritrean People's Liberation Front, the EPLF, quickly became the dominant Eritrean faction. Although the fighting in Ethiopia and Eritrea continued throughout the 1980s, by the end of the decade, things were changing. As the Soviet Union collapsed, the military regime lost its benefactor and the balance shifted in the rebels' favour. In late May 1991, they entered the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, and overthrew the military government. The overthrow of the regime marked a decisive moment for Eritrea as the EPLF announced plans to hold an independence referendum. Crucially, the group's rebel partners, who'd by now formed the new Ethiopian government, agreed that Eritrea could no longer be held in the Union against its will. In April 1993, Eritreans almost unanimously voted for statehood, and just a month later, the state of Eritrea joined the UN as the world's newest country. I hope you're finding this helpful. If so, please do give it a like and perhaps subscribe if you haven't already. It all really helps. Thanks so much, and now back to the video. At first, there were hopes that Eritrea would become a modern democracy. Under Afwerki, who'd become president, international support poured into the new country. Meanwhile, a draft constitution unveiled in 1997 enshrined democracy and civil liberties. However, things soon broke down. In 1998, following a border dispute, Eritrea turned on its former rebel partners and invaded Ethiopia, sparking a brutal 2-year war. But while the conflict ended in 2000, continuing tensions with Ethiopia saw Eritrea remain highly militarised. From there, Afwerki tightened his grip on power. As well as shutting down independent media and indefinitely postponing elections, a large-scale crackdown in 2001 saw almost all opposition leaders jailed. Since then, things have gone from bad to worse. Having refused to endorse the 1997 draft constitution, under Afwerki's rule, Eritrea has become one of the most repressive countries on the planet. Under the ruling People's Front for Democracy and Justice, the successor of the EPLF, the country now operates as a totalitarian one-man dictatorship without a legislature, independent judiciary, or press freedom. Meanwhile, with fundamental human rights wholly curtailed, the ruling regime enforces a conscription system that forces men and women into military service without a clearly defined end term. All this has seen hundreds of thousands of Eritreans flee the country. In addition to the harsh domestic conditions, Afwerki has also faced considerable international criticism for his foreign policy. For example, after reaching a peace agreement in 2018 with the Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali, Eritrea sent troops to fight alongside Ethiopian forces in the Tigray civil war. This led to allegations of large-scale war crimes. In addition, it's also been accused of arming insurgents in neighbouring Sudan. But while Eritrea remains largely closed and firmly opposed to the West, it isn't completely isolated. Notably, it maintains close contacts with India, which has emerged as a key trading partner and has long provided development assistance. Meanwhile, against the backdrop of renewed tensions with Ethiopia, which has even suggested that it could invade Eritrea to gain Red Sea access, Afwerki has been building his ties with Somalia and Egypt, both of which also have their differences with Addis Ababa. Finally, Eritrea has become one of Russia's few reliable friends on the world stage, regularly voting alongside Moscow at the United Nations. But despite the terrible situation in Eritrea, up until now, Afwerki has faced little organised opposition. Internally, his grip on power appears to be tight. Meanwhile, externally, criticism has tended to be muted. Exiled activists, including journalists and former government officials working to expose Eritrea's human rights abuses, often do so at considerable personal risk. The Eritrean government has targeted critics abroad using intimidation, surveillance and threats against their families back home. But despite all this, there are now signs that opposition to Afwerki's rule is growing. While there's little indication of how ordinary Eritreans within the country feel, an increasing number of escapees and dissidents are speaking out against Afwerki's brutal rule, detailing harrowing accounts of forced labour, arbitrary detention and torture. At the same time, younger second-generation Eritreans living abroad are also becoming more active. As a result, the opposition groups have become bolder. Increasingly, Eritrean Independence Days are now a chance to demonstrate against the regime in Western capitals. In addition, dissident organisations are working more openly. For example, a group known as Brigade Nemedu or Blue Revolution has been reaching out to the diaspora communities to spread the message about the human rights abuses and counter regime intimidation. But crucially, as tensions between Ethiopia and Eritrea rise again, Ethiopia also appears to be more closely involved. This was highlighted when two opposition groups, including Blue Revolution, openly met in Addis Ababa in early 2025 to discuss overthrowing the Afwerki regime, something that couldn't have happened without tacit Ethiopian acceptance. Naturally, all this raises the question of whether Addis Ababa will go further. For example, could it go beyond supporting opposition groups and even sponsor a significant armed insurgency? More radically, and given the renewed tensions with Eritrea, could it even invade the country and carry out regime change? While neither option can be wholly discounted, especially given the history of tensions between the two countries, both possibilities seem unlikely. Given Eritrea's heavy fortifications, an insurgency would be almost futile. Likewise, an invasion would be hugely risky. But there's also another critical factor to consider. Afwerki is getting old. Now almost 80 years old, questions are growing over how long his regime can last, especially as he doesn't appear to have groomed a successor. In this sense, if Afwerki were to die in office, the regime's future looks uncertain. While some observers believe that the military or ruling elite would attempt to maintain the status quo, others have suggested that the country will inevitably collapse into chaos with internal power struggles or even civil unrest. Still, none of this may be imminent. Afwerki, despite his age, appears to be fit and active. For all these reasons, there's little available evidence to suggest that the regime is under serious internal threat, at least as yet, while long-suppressed external movements are certainly gaining momentum and Ethiopia is perhaps becoming more involved. Removing Isaias Afwerki from power, Africa's most repressive dictator, remains a formidable challenge. I hope you found that useful. If so, here are some more videos that you might find helpful. Thanks so much for watching, and see you in the next video.